Hi, welcome to another episode of FS Fireside Streams. I'm Pooja Khandelwal, Content Strategy Manager at Fashion Snoops, and joining me today is an exceptional artist who creates one-of-a-kind textiles using only natural materials like botanicals, plant matter, minerals, and food waste. She treats her fabric through alchemical dyeing and ancient shibori, transforming each textile into its very own story. So without further ado, it brings me immense pleasure to welcome Cara Marie Piazza.
Hi, hello everyone.
Hey, Cara, thanks so much for joining us today. You've been an inspiration to our team at FS, and we even have you as one of our key influencers for our Spring Summer 23 Sentiment Grow. And so before we begin today, I'd like to give you and our audience a brief summary of this sentiment. Sick of stagnation and isolation, consumers are stepping into the post-pandemic era with an intention to grow, to expand, flourish, and thrive. They're trying to rebuild the world through positive interactions with their green and blue spaces, striving to strengthen their connection to the growing materials around them, deepening the appreciation for cultivation using florals as a symbol of what we have nurtured and what has reciprocally nurtured us. And speaking of florals, floral healing is one of the biggest call-outs for this sentiment. Across cultures and languages, flowers symbolize unfoldings and new beginnings, invoking the ideas of spiritual clarity, personal growth, and enlightenment. And we could not think of a better person to represent the idea of floral healing. So having said that, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, and your journey up until here?
Yes, of course. I love that sentiment. I'm glad that it's something that seems to be continuing on trend-wise as well. So my name is Cara Marie Piazza. I sit somewhere in the intersection between being a fabricator and an artist at the same time. So I work only with natural dyes. And I create natural dye solutions for both fashion designers, interior designers, and artists. So I run like a very small scale natural dye house, as well as teaching workshops and classes on how to natural dye yourself at home. And then also selling my own like very small little product line and doing custom pieces for private clients too.
I have to say, I absolutely love your backdrop. I mean, I
Thanks.
want to be there right now.
So messy. We can see all my notebooks.
No, it's perfect. It's just so perfect.
Thank you.
Where do you draw your inspiration from?
You know, it comes from a variety of different things. I think that my, at the risk of sounding corny, I think nature is obviously like one of the biggest sources of inspiration for me. Oh, welcome. This is my dog, Theodore, saying hi.
Hello, Theodore.
Sorry. So nature is definitely like one of my largest inspirations. I think that, I actually was born and bred in New York City. So it's not necessarily, I think a lot of people kind of get this common misconception that I was born, in the middle of a grassy knoll somewhere in the forest, and that I just like emerged and became this natural dyer. But the truth is, like, it was kind of the exact opposite. I think in trying to find my place back with nature, I actually found this medium. And then also I'm very inspired kind of by process. I think that working with the plants, I work with the plants in a very intuitive way. I think when I'm creating colors for clients, it's definitely based on working with the different dye materials. I'm self-taught, so I've been doing this for about like 10, 11 years now. And, the first 3 were all experiments and everything was turning brown. And I mean, brown is a beautiful color too, but like I was missing, I missed the point a lot. So I think that I had a lot of time to kind of intuitively grasp like what made what. I learned the long way around. I didn't really like come to this in a scientific matter. I came to it more like a messy folk method cook, you know? And by doing that and kind of just like having fun and experimenting, like that for me was the inspiring part of the process, was just being able to like play with the plants in a way that felt natural and kind of like meditative. And then that's kind of guided my process since the beginning.
So can you tell us a little more about the ingredients and different techniques that you use?
Yes, absolutely. So I work with a variety of different natural dye stuffs. So when I'm working for clients on a larger scale, so that means we're doing anything from like 25 to 100 pounds of clothing, I work with natural dye extracts. So that means that it's not something that I've grown myself. They're basically powders that are extracted from dye plants, and they can range to everything from like the bark of a tree to synthetic, like not synthetic, but like a powder that's reduced from like marigolds, for example. And this enables us to have a much more solid color on our dye, from me using like what you see behind my head, which are recycled flowers post an event that we basically like saved from landfill. So, you know, it's a variety of different dye stuffs. It's pretty much anything that comes from a plant we try and work with. I also work a lot with food wastes. We partner with different restaurants to take their avocado pits. You know, some of my food waste at home. We have like everyone's collecting onion skins for us at all different times. So it's a lot of our dye materials are also about like, forgive the pun here, but like foraging relationships in the city. I think that like we want to, for me, I think the exciting thing is seeing where different industries intersect, and natural dyes actually provide a really amazing resource to kind of like close the gap between industries that might not link. Like, for example, like working with a restaurant to take their trash, basically turn it into food waste to make a high-end couture garment. Like that might have not been necessarily thought as like something that was high, oh, Theodore, something that was like high end, you know? And I think that part of my mission is getting consumers to kind of change their narrative around what luxury can be.
Wow. I mean, there is spirituality in what you do, because, you know, you mentioned that it's meditative for you. There is an element of sustainability, because it's amazing that you are actually collecting food waste and the flowers that probably would go into landfill. And there's also this part where you're helping build this sort of a community, helping people come together. I think it's so beautiful what you're doing. But going back to what you said, you know, I'm curious to understand, how does different season impact your work? Is there a significant difference between something that you'd make in winter versus something that you'd create in summer? I mean, given that fashion most of the time is season specific.
Absolutely. I think that, so it's been a bit of a learning process. So, and it's also for myself, and also like kind of having to teach my customers that they can't necessarily have patterns that they might have wanted with certain techniques. So when I'm working with the extracts, that actually allows us to kind of work all year long because they're dried. So for solid colors, we can kind of, you know, we can kind of have a stock of dye on hand that would be fully all year long. But if we're working on certain patterning, like bundle dyeing, for example, and the client wants coreopsis or cosmos with like a fresh leaf print, we have 3 months to do that. Or if we're looking for goldenrod, for example, we only have 3 months at the end of the summer to do that. Or black walnut, we have the winter months to do that. So those projects I necessarily wouldn't scale because we only have those short months and my team is very small. It's just me and my assistant. So, you know, I think that that's why I also like to teach online, because I think that that helps empower people to learn what's seasonal and in their local environment that they can work with too. You know, like what's something that I wouldn't recommend someone in New York, like someone in California where you are can't forage the same things that I can forage, right? Like we come in completely different places. And that's also the beauty of natural dyes, is that so the beauty and then also the curse, right? Like there's a pinch of poison in every antidote. So there's this, you know, you can make you basically get a rainbow of color from one different dye stuff based on the soil health of where it was harvested, the water you used to dye it, the metal of the pot used to dye it, the mood of the person harvesting it, my mood that day, the alkalinity of the water, basically the time of year it was harvested. All these different factors can go into changing the color of the dye, which is something that sounds really daunting to the budding natural dyer, but at the same time is also really beautiful because it kind of just what's the word I'm looking for? Like it basically, oh my God, I'm blanking here. It helps enforce that everything is unique, right? It's like we're kind of in the same principle here. Like we're all working within the same kind of community and whatever, but we all have our own individual unique attributes and beauty and whatever. And like, that's kind of the same way that natural dyes operate too.
It makes it seasonality question. It makes it, you know, very real and raw, you know, stripping away the filters and just keeping it as is, as it is meant to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing that's like beautiful about that is that, you know, I think people were removed from the fact that like color from nature ties you to your place and like your locality, and like the same way wine tastes different grown in California as it does to the south of France. Color it follows the same principles, right? So it has a terroir, like wine, for example. Like madder roots grown in Germany will look different to madder roots grown in Turkey. So that can also change the seasonality of the color that it is that the client is getting. But I think honestly, I found luckily that if you are as transparent as possible with your customers and you teach them how to be transparent as possible with their customers, everyone's open. It's that shock that people don't want to get. I think as long as the label says exactly what's going to happen and where you're going to go with the garment, and it's going to change and morph and like age with you and like give it a new bath like in 5 years, people are usually like open and willing to that being part of the process.
So was there a trigger? What pushed you to start working with natural dyes and foraged ingredients?
Yeah, so I went to college in London at the Chelsea College of Art and Design, and I was studying textiles. I was like a New York City fashion kid who I worked in PR, I worked in jewelry, I was like doing the whole thing, kind of like I don't know if I have ADD, but I basically like want my hand in all the cookie jars. Like I want to try everything. So that was kind of how, when I was in college, I was like testing styling and, just every part of fashion that seemed exciting to me. I was trying, but I was also finding that I was suffering from like very serious burnout. So it was like, I just kind of did like, something wasn't like clicking properly for me. I think like the beautiful thing about my college was that they really prepare you for like how toxic the industry is inherently, like physically. And then I was also starting to feel it emotionally too. And something wasn't like gay. I didn't know how I was going to like enter the marketplace. It was like, congratulations, here you are. The world sucks. Go for it. Okay. And luckily I was at school, and we had an amazing dye lab. It was all synthetic, but we had like one bucket of indigo, and I don't even remember what the other bucket of natural dyes were. It was just like 2 buckets for like 150 kids, right? And they were like, you can try, but you'll never make money doing that. That was like literally the theory. But they did have a lady come in and teach us a workshop on onion skins, and like something clicked. I was like, wow, this is really cool. Like I was found it like really interesting. I was like, this is like, okay. And then I came home, was interning at a company, and the woman's best friend naturally dyed the dresses. And I was like, huh, like, okay, like I started seeing like little signs everywhere. Walk into a bookshop, and like the first book I see is India Flint's Eco Color. And I was just like, oh my God, what is this Bible? Like read it, like I still have it to this day. It's like messy. And then like all signs just started like, I think it's like that thing when you're like in the right synchronicity, like you just start seeing the thing everywhere. Or maybe I'm a crazy person and I became obsessed. It could go both ways.
No, you do. You absolutely do.
It's both ways. Like some people might think I'm mentally ill, but you never know. I was just like, okay. So, and then I found like a store that sold it, and I just became obsessed. And I came back to school and asked, like, the thing that was brilliant about my college was, you know, even if there wasn't a pathway, if you like really pled your case for wanting to do something, they said, yeah, sure, you're paying, like we don't care. So I said, you know, can I dedicate my thesis year to natural dyes? And they were like, yeah, as long as it's good, go for it. So my whole final year, I just did a whole project on working with food waste and like creating a small fashion line. And I never looked back. I came home, I started working in the basement of my friend's vintage store, and like it was just one of those things where every time I felt like I wanted to quit, someone else reached out seemingly out of nowhere and was like, hey, can you do this for me? Mm-hmm. And here we are 10 years later.
Meant to be. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. It actually takes me back to my college days. And it just reminded me of this one day where we went into a workshop to dye fabrics from indigo. And that was like one of my favorite days of you know, studying textile designing. So, and no, it happens. You see it everywhere, no matter where you go. All you can think about are textiles, patterns, prints, and dyes and colors. So yeah,
it's true. If you catch the bug, you catch the bug. It's
yes.
Like, and I think that's the most beautiful thing when I teach people is when you can see when like they catch it, and like there's this little like glimmer, and then it just becomes this, you know, new process and medium and pathway that I think is really special.
Mm-hmm. So floral healing is playing a huge role in the post-pandemic era, and we are seeing a rise in consumers' mindset of becoming more involved in the growing process of flowers, from wanting to understand their unique health benefits to truly bonding with them. So what's your opinion about it? Have you witnessed such a shift, and has there been a surge in demand for your products?
Yeah, I think that I've definitely noticed there's been a surge in natural dyers, period. I think there's been like an absolute mushroom, like exponential explosion of, you know, people wanting to take this into their own hands. And I do see it, like a lot of people are growing as well. You know, I do think that they're trying to have the full package, and whether that be like lifestyle, aspirational oriented, it also seems like a beautiful, fun thing to just start a flower farm. But yeah, I definitely see that. I think that it's, you know, there's definitely a boom during the pandemic. I think it started happening before though, and maybe this is just a tipping point. And I guess in terms of the healing aspect of it, I think for me, the biggest thing that I've noticed is that people, or I hope, is that people are giving themselves more time or more permission to kind of be like creative and play in a way that maybe they didn't feel like they had the right to before. I think that there was like, or at least I just noticed in the like in the in the classes that I teach, especially in New York, is that, you know, students come in and they're like really tight. They're really worried I'm going to grade them or like judge them in some way, or like there's going to be this like marking at the end, or like that it has to look exactly like mine. And like by the end of the class, they're like relaxed. They've made best friends with everyone in the course. They're like, you know, and it has this healing quality. So whether it be, and I think it's twofold. I think it's the plants. I definitely find that like working with plants myself plants are medicine, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Pharmaceuticals are made from plants. Like people forget
absolutely.
that. It's not like, so we're just so removed from that process, you know, within this. I'm not an herbalist, so like full disclaimer, I have no medical background. But just even like working with plants to like heal myself, just with like aromatherapy, like flower essences. Sorry, it's a motorcycle.
Yeah, or just even seeing them sometimes that helps.
Being around them.
The colors and vibrancy.
Absolutely. So, you know, I think like my short answer is like, I hope. I hope it's definitely going to kind of continue on and be more of people's practice.
So there are so many factors involved, you know, what are some of the setbacks or challenges you face in working with natural materials?
You know, pretty much the main setbacks are the variability that I was talking about before, the fact that you really, you know, that education process, like I find fun, but it is like slightly masochistic in a way, because it's like you really are coming up against like teaching people that they have to mitigate their expectations, and that's not always easy, right? Like especially in New York, especially in fashion where everyone wants everything yesterday. I think, you know, if I could go on the biggest crusade, it would be against quality control in clothing. I think that is like one of the most wasteful practices there is in fashion, when it's like so much clothing goes wasted based on like seam differences. So it's like these like ideas that like we all just like live by or something. It's like, how do we change those? How do we just realize that like, and maybe this isn't the right format to say this, but they're just clothes. No one should die or have a panic attack or a mental breakdown over a t-shirt. Shouldn't happen, right? Like it's like shouldn't be. I
think that statement sums it up so well, sums up everything that we're trying to talk here so well. It's so simple. Yeah, so well put, so simple. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what potential do you see for mass acceptance for natural materials and sustainable processes being implemented globally? And how far do you think we are from it?
I think that question might need to be framed differently, because I think that, not that it needs to be framed differently, but I think that there's a natural dye should never be implemented en masse. And I think that's like an interesting conversation to have also. Like the way that our systems are built are not sustainable. So there's this theorist like Ezio Manzini, and he talks about like the cosmopolitan localism. So it's like the thing that would be truly sustainable is there being like little pockets and little centers set up everywhere instead of mass homogenization of anything. Correct. Right? So it's like if a company like a Zara or an H&M implemented a natural dye program, but it wasn't done in like the most sustainable way, they could wipe out the entire ecosystem of a plant, right? Like it should never be done on that scale, ever. Like you know, maybe with a food waste dye, maybe with an agricultural byproduct, maybe there's a way that we could create a dye en masse that comes from things that are already made en masse, right? So it's like having those kind of questions around doing something around scaling, I think is important before it ever takes on that kind of role. Or is it a situation where, you know, companies maybe learn that they can like regionally break up different
exactly
diagrams, right?
And that's the idea that came to me, that, you know, if a company like Zara, H&M, or any larger companies want to do it,
we're just throwing out
the bad do it in, I know it needs to be like in small pockets. like what they are producing in United States for US audience will be very different from what they're doing in Europe or, you know, South America or India or anywhere else.
Exactly. Or even breaking it up further and regionally to the US. It's
Absolutely.
like, can you base these dye programmings by watershed? Like that would be like a radically sustainable thing to do. Are they probably going to do it? I don't know. Maybe they just don't even know that they can, right? Like, is there like the Northeast division that has like a color that's like only grown in the Northeast? Or is there something that's only grown in the Pacific Northwest?
Locally sourcing and creating a sort of this community locally and being very focused with that thought process. Yeah.
Right. And then, you know, and in the theme of fashion in that way, like that also is fun because then it, like in a naughty, not naughty, but I don't know how to like, it also breeds exclusivity. Like you can only get the Pacific Northwest in the Pacific Northwest region. You can only get the, you know, like the New York color or whatever. And then people get excited and they trade them. And it just, it can still be fun and still like fall into the same way that fashion sells too, I think. Someone should pay me to do that.
Well, yeah, probably that could be your big next project.
Yeah,
which actually brings me to my next question. So what's next? Are you learning or incorporating any new techniques? And are there any big projects coming up that we should be on the lookout for?
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm actually, I have a couple of, unfortunately, I have a couple of things I can't talk about, but I am currently working on rebranding my dye kits. So we're going to come up with something that's like a little bit more accessible and a little bit more, you know, easy for someone who, I think what was great about launching my kit last year was that I made something that was already for natural dyers, you know, people who kind of already understood the process. And now I want to do something that's a little bit more accessible to someone who has never even heard of the process before. So we're working on redoing that and I'm hoping to like launch that for 2022 at some point. And then I'm also working on name to be decided, but something called the Dybrary, where
I love it.
Where we are like me and my team and we're taking on a work study are like beginning the actual reference book. So we're going to be working on like very slowly and scientifically creating like a reference that people can look at and have recipes and access to. But that might, this is in baby stages, so that could take a while.
Yeah, I have to tell that to my team. They're going to absolutely love it and jump on it.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a trend. It's going to be a trend forecasting resource for sure. So when it's ready, we'll let you guys.
Yeah, please do. Well, I have to say that the work you're doing is so inspiring, and it's amazing to see how we can turn flowers and food scraps into beautiful dyes that go on to be amazing pieces of clothing. Your dedication to changing the toxic status quo of the fashion industry is incredible, and we're so excited to keep seeing you grow in the future. It was such a pleasure to chat with you today, and thank you so much on behalf of the entire FS team for your time and expertise.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thanks a lot.